Triple H.
You want a war? You're gonna get one.
Now get the guns, the drums, the my generation will take the fall. The saints will across the nation, and it's a sex, the gods, the fakes, the frauds, they're messing with me. Come on, come on, come on, let's get it out. Move to the music, play that fucking music. Live through my music, yeah.
Hey yo, welcome back to Reliving the War Soldier. It's the 29th of November 1999 and this week we've got Raw in Los Angeles, California while Nitro's in Denver, Colorado. We're going to skip the formalities this week because this is, without question, the most overbooked episode of Monday Nitro in the show's entire history, and we've got a terrible lot to get through. I've done a little extra prep work to make the segments a little more streamlined, but really there's nothing anyone can do to save this train wreck. Let's jump in head first and hope for the best. Bill Goldberg's here to cut a promo and he immediately goes after the outsiders. He says Hall and Nash are like a pair of high school kids. They come out to make everyone laugh with a little bit of comedy, but not tonight. Goldberg actually liked it when he got attacked last week. Billy Boy isn't one to play around. So tonight Goldberg's gonna face Kevin Nash one-on-one and Scott can try to interfere if he wants to. It won't end well for the bad guy. The outsiders show up. Scott's looking a bit more clear-headed this week. They tell Goldberg don't sing it, bring it before walking down to the ring. And Goldberg gets a little help from his new best buddy, Sid Vicious. Sid makes it clear that he's turned babyface by actually saying into the microphone that there's a new babyface in town, and he gets in the ring to help Goldberg fight off the outsiders. Security show up once again to break up the fight, so it's like the end of Nitro last week really. Schiavone then says we've got a triple main event tonight. Goldberg versus Nash, Scott Hall defending his TV title and US title against Sid in a world title match featuring Bret Hart and Meng. All three of these matches are going to be no DQ matches. There's also a Sting vs Double J vs Chris Benoit #1 contender match, Steve Williams vs Jerry Only inside a steel cage, and there's going to be a mud wrestling match. All of these matches I've mentioned and not one of them is the actual Nitro main event tonight, so yeah, pause the video and go grab your bottle of whiskey, you're going to need it. Roddy Piper arrives to the arena, as does Leilani Kai and Rhonda Singh. You may remember Rhonda is Bertha Faye in the WWF, and Leilani Kai was in WCW about maybe 6 or 7 months ago. These women take verbal abuse all night, and it begins with Roddy Piper pointing them towards the buffet table inside the arena. All three head inside with Piper getting his own little room while the women talk about what they're going to wear tonight. But a little later on, Creative Control summon Piper to Russo's office and Roddy gets informed that he'll be refereeing the mud wrestling match between Rhonda Singh and Leilani Kai. At first Roddy doesn't want to do it, but his mood changes after thinking about it and he agrees to be the referee. Tony Marinara phones Big Vito and he reminds the boys that they need to take out Disco Inferno tonight. They go for a walk and they bump into Mean Gene Okerlund and Big Vito gets a great idea. These three should go to a gentleman's club. Johnny the Bull remembers that the boys have to get Disco Inferno tonight, but Vito just wants to party. Mean Gene does like the sound of free drinks and half-naked women, so they head to the club where Mean Gene gets absolutely wankered. He ends up with his tie wrapped around his head, he's having way too much of a good time, and when the Mamalukes get the chance to take a few girls home, Mean Gene decides he's absolutely fine where he is. We'll come back to Vito and Johnny a little later on. Inside the ring, Creative Control were able to beat Booker T and Buff Bagwell in a tag team match. Buff delivered his blockbuster, but Curt Hennig kept the referee busy. This allowed Patrick to hit Bagwell with a steel chair, and Creative Control won via pinfall. During the inevitable post-match beatdown, Midnight showed up and she delivered a few dropkicks to Patrick and Gerald. And when the boys went back to Russo's office, they got ripped apart for their poor performance. Curt Hennig also took shots at Creative Control, so to show Hennig who's in charge around here, Russo booked Curt in a match against Midnight. That match is going to take place a little later on. Our number one continues on. Lex Luger tells Elizabeth that her days of Chanel clothing and fine dining are over. Liz is getting served and Lex is going to take her for every penny she's worth. Liz says she'll do anything to straighten this mess out and Lex says okay, he'll think about it. Ryan Shamrock, now known as Symphony, receives flowers from the Maestro. As the show goes on, she also receives chocolates and a big teddy bear. And yeah, Val Venis didn't have to go through all this trouble to get into Ryan's stickies. We'll also come back to Symphony a little later on. She gets one more surprise that's really the best present of all. Jeff Jarrett says he'll come one step closer to the World Heavyweight Championship when he beats Sting and Chris Benoit tonight on Nitro. When Mike Tenay wondered if Double J's maybe fallen out of favour with the powers that be, Jarrett ended up hitting him with his guitar. Poor Mike didn't deserve this at all. Back in the ring, yes I know, I'm sorry, but I'm just going through everything that happened. But back in the ring, Complete Hit Brad Knobbs called out Norman Smiley. Smiley was watching in the back and he screamed when Fit Finlay walked past before hiding under the table. Finlay ended up going to the ring instead of Norman, and we got ourselves another fight without a referee. Finlay again came out on top and he celebrated by cutting Brian's hair. Did this haircut make Brian look less of a tit? No it didn't. Russo then tells Juventud Guerrera that due to some prior arrangements, Jushin Liger, no, that clown Jushin Liger according to Russo, must compete on Monday Nitro tonight. If Juventud Guerrera can beat him and win the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, then Russo's going to fix all of Juvi's visa problems. So the match gets underway without either man's entrance being recorded for TV, and Buzzkill calling the action because Russo didn't care about the significance or future importance of this match. Juvi pulls off a bulldog before Liger ends up on the outside. The challenger delivers a nice springboard crossbody, but when the action gets back in the ring, it's Liger pulling off a frog splash. We then see a backbreaker from Liger followed by a surfboard stretch. Juvi then takes a belly to belly before the champ looks for a Liger bomb. Guerrera reverses it though and the match continues on. Just after Juvi pulls off a springboard famouser, Buzzkill gets close to the ring and the referee gets distracted. This allows Juvi to grab a tequila bottle he hid in his coat pocket and he proceeds to smash it over Liger's head. This is enough to give Juvi a pinfall win, and therefore Guerrera is the new IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion. One problem though, Russo did not get permission from New Japan to book this title change. The idea Russo had was for Liger to win the belt back before returning to Japan, which is exactly what happened, but New Japan didn't want their champion dropping the belt to anyone. Folks incorrectly state that this whole thing ended the New Japan and WCW partnership, which isn't true, seeing as the Great Muta comes back for a few dates. But for years, New Japan didn't recognise this title change and they didn't make any mention of Guerrera holding their junior heavyweight belt. It is all pretty interesting. Before we finally get a look at what happened on Raw, the Revolution came down to the ring to make their new anti-American stance official. They're all annoyed that fans are cheering for foreigners, those being Chris Benoit and Bret Hart, while booing Americans like Douglas, Saturn, Malenko in Asia. The Revolution are now, according to Dean Malenko, a sovereign nation unto themselves. Dean spits on the stars and stripes to prove he no longer considers himself an American, and Dean then says he's a python while Shane's a rattlesnake. Asia's a boa, and Saturn says he's a trouser. Yes, a trouser snake. Custodian Jim Duggan won't stand for this. No one talks bad about America when Hacksaw's around. So Jim gets in the ring and his 2x4 comically bends and twists as the fight continues on. The numbers are too much for Hacksaw, the Revolution get the upper hand, but the faction decides to run away when Chris Benoit shows up. Jim Duggan and Chris Benoit, quite the odd couple, wouldn't you agree? Don't finish that bottle of whiskey just yet. We're nowhere near done and you'll need a little tipple for the celebration at the very end of Raw. We're going to see Test and Stephanie tie the knot, but first we've got Big Show and Kane taking on Viscera and Bossman plus a Triple H promo. Nitro continues on with Scott Hall versus Sid Vicious. So the WWF champions went from competing in the middle of the card to jerking the curtain. Being in the first match isn't necessarily a bad thing, but Big Show hasn't main evented a card since winning the title, and that includes SmackDown. The entrances take longer than the match itself here. Show did get his hands on Bossman very briefly, but as soon as the number one contender tagged out, it was Viscera and Kane taking over until the end of the match. Kane delivers his flying clothesline, he sets Vis up for a chokeslam, X-Pac comes down to hit Kane with a chair, and the Big Red Machine falls victim to an X-Factor. Viscera performs a big splash and the babyfaces take a loss in our Raw opening match. X-Pac gets a ton of heat when he spits on Tori before kicking her right in the face, an act that made Kane sit right up before Kid ran away, but X-Pac returned to the ring along with his DX comrades when it was time for Triple H to cut his promo. Hunter wants to speak directly to Vince McMahon. He says McMahon made this rivalry personal and DX had to go out and get a restraining order to protect them from Vince. McMahon isn't allowed within 50 feet of D-Generation X because he lost his marbles last week during that limousine incident. But come Armageddon, that restraining order won't be in effect and Triple H is going to beat Vince within an inch of his life. Tonight, fans are expecting to see a wedding, and when Triple H reminds everyone about this, the crowd boos. When he says there won't be a wedding tonight, the fans cheer. So clearly, the audience in attendance didn't care a single bit about Test and Stephanie tying the knot. McMahon comes out, he says it's a good thing DX have a protective order because Vince would do anything to protect his family. He then says he'll have Triple H's blood on his hands at the pay-per-view, and this little statement doesn't intimidate the game a single bit. And to keep D-Generation X busy tonight, Vince books a few matches. Vince is giving Test an early wedding present by booking him against Triple H, and as for X-Pac and the Outlaws, they're going to face the Rock and Sock Connection along with a partner of their choosing. Only immediate family members and close friends are allowed to attend the wedding ceremony later on, so if DX try to get involved, each and every member is going to get fired. This statement makes Triple H laugh, so clearly the game has a plan up his sleeve. We then cut to Al Snow backstage, who believes he's going to get selected as the Rock and Sock Connection's tag team partner, and it's pretty obvious that Al doesn't care much for The Rock. On Nitro, Scott Hall said he has no idea why he's holding the TV title. He doesn't get any free TV dinners, he doesn't get to meet any TV stars. The belt is totally worthless and he decides he doesn't want it anymore. So Kev takes the belt off Scott and he slam dunks it into a trash can. You know, there's been some good matches for that belt over the years, but this is a new WCW, one that doesn't really care about the history of the promotion. So the Sid vs Scott match was only for the US title and it wasn't great to be honest. Scott being in a better state allowed him to pull off some actual wrestling moves though, so that's always nice. Remember, this one could only end in pinfall or submission, it's an ODQ match, so you just know we're going to have interference. This time, the interference didn't make any sense, and even Schiavone said he can't understand why it happened. The referee takes a bump just before Scott takes a chokeslam and a powerbomb. Why the referee needed to get knocked out's anyone's guess, seeing as it's an ODQ match, but anyway, Kevin Nash's interference didn't work out, so for some reason, Jeff Jarrett came down to attack Sid, and this attack allowed Scott to win via pinfall. Goldberg runs down to attack Jarrett, Billy Boy helps Sid to his feet, and Nitro moves on to its next match. Now, if you've been keeping track over the past month or so, you'd have noticed that the powers that be seem to be favouring the outsiders in quite an indirect manner. But still, Nitro moves so fast week after week that it would be easy to forget about this. This whole thing's going to make more sense following Starrcade 99, but the way WCW's telling this current story isn't very effective. You can't write a show with this idea in your head that fans don't have an attention span while also writing a storyline where you expect people to remember minute details. For sure, you and I can follow along without much problem, but casual fans are going to see this as one big giant mess. Even folks today who cover wrestling on YouTube totally miss these details because they feel inconsequential as they happen on Nitro. This all leads to something. As a matter of fact, a big storyline's been unfolding for a very long time on Monday Nitro, but the journey to the eventual payoff just isn't working. Matt Hardy takes on Edge next on Raw. On Nitro, it's Jerry Only versus Steve Williams inside a steel cage. Matt was all over Edge in the early going, but he went to the top rope one too many times. Edge cooled his opponent down with a German suplex, but Matt came right back with a superplex. Again, going to the top rope proved to be Matt's downfall. He got drop kicked off the top turnbuckle and he managed to knock a camera right off the cameraman's shoulders. From here, both Christian and Jeff Hardy got in on the action, so all sportsmanship was thrown out the window. Edge got the win when Christian threw Matt into him for a spear. So it looks like the friendship between these four could be getting a bit rocky. Honestly, they're better off as rivals instead of being buddies. On Nitro, we have the untrained Jerry Only trying to get through a cage match with Steve Williams, so you can imagine how that turned out. Only did pull off a crossbody in this one, but the rest of his offense was woeful. He sold the power slam just fine, but the rest of his selling was pretty bad, and you can see Doc didn't really like being inside a cage with someone so green. Oklahoma provided commentary while the Misfits and Vampiro watched on from the outside. And when Oklahoma tried to get closer to the cage, the Misfits grabbed him and he got covered in barbecue sauce. Now, the idea behind this was Oklahoma getting humiliated while Dr. Death's locked inside the steel cage. Apparently, Williams can't help Oklahoma while all this is going on, but two problems right here. One, can Steve not climb out of the cage? It doesn't have a roof, so what's the problem? And secondly, he accidentally opens the cage door before closing it again. So yeah, good job, Dr. Death. He ends up throwing only through the doors, so the Misfit gets a win over Steve Williams. Standard WCW match rules mustn't apply anymore or something. Brutal stuff here on Monday Nitro. There isn't a word to describe how rough this show's been so far. Chyna cuts a promo on Raw's War. On Nitro, Bret Hart defends his world title against Meng. Before our Raw match, we see footage from Stephanie's bachelorette party in Las Vegas. The drinks were flowing, Fabulous Moolah was still being a mean old bastard, and Stephanie even got a stripper while the great Fred Astaire looked away in disbelief. Absolute heathens. Back in the arena, Chyna explains that her thumb's feeling a lot better after she hit Y2J with a hammer on SmackDown. She didn't press charges against Chris because she wants to punish Chris herself. So Jericho shows up on the entranceway, he calls Chyna a mutant, and while Jericho would love to beat Chyna tonight for the IC belt, he can't compete because the hammer shot on SmackDown gave him a concussion. Chris had a miserable Thanksgiving because he spent the whole day puking his guts up, and all because he broke Chyna's fingernail with a little tap on Raw's War last week. Chris says he'll face Chyna at Armageddon instead, and because he can't chill out, Miss Kitty comes out to give the Ayatollah a little assistance. Chyna then makes the match official, so we will see Chyna versus Chris Jericho once again on pay-per-view. On Nitro, Bret says Meng is a destroyer, but he's never faced the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. And hate to be that guy, but this is a lie because Bret wrestled Haku quite a few times in the WWF. They even had a televised match back in 1991. Oh yeah, Chavo Guerrero's doing backstage interviews because Mike Tenay got wiped out earlier on. Bret tried to go toe-to-toe with a man called Meng, but that didn't work out too well. The Hitman takes a clothesline before he foolishly tries to put his opponent down with more strikes. So Meng gives him a classic backhander and Bret's already in serious trouble. Bret continues to get wrecked. He takes a pile driver followed by a shoulder breaker and Meng's looking pretty good. Hart does dodge a Rolling Thunder attempt though, and this allows Bret to pull off his signature headbutt. We see the Russian leg sweep followed by the middle rope elbow drop, and when Bret goes to lock in the sharpshooter, the outsiders show up. Bret gets shoved into the referee, which leads to him falling out of the ring, and so Meng decides to put Scott Hall in the Tongan death grip. Kevin Nash saves his buddy by hitting Meng a million times with a kendo stick, and when Meng finally goes down, the outsiders head to the outside to take care of Bret. Once again, Hall and Nash don't actually cause any damage to the Hitman because Chris Benoit shows up just in the nick of time to hit both outsiders with their own kendo stick. This allows Bret Hart to lock in the sharpshooter back inside the ropes, and because Meng's been knocked out, the referee calls for the bell. Bret Hart wins this no disqualification match, another no DQ match that had a referee bump even though it was totally unnecessary. Backstage, the Nitro girls got involved in a food fight. Leilani Kai walks past and she chokes on some food even though she wasn't involved in the fight. This leads to Juventud Guerrera running over and he tries to save her life in the most blatantly sexual way possible, and I'm sure in reality that Vince Russo thought this was absolutely hilarious. When Juvi visits the powers that be, Russo can't believe Juvi held that, and I quote, wildebeest out. But all this, the stuff that happened with Leilani Kai, it gives Lex Luger a great idea. He visits Russo's office and he tells Vince that Miss Elizabeth will compete tonight in Kai's place, meaning it's going to be Liz versus Ronda Singh in a mud wrestling contest. By the way, Russo thought it'd be funny to call Ronda a behemoth right here. So Liz looks for Sting to get some help, but again, Sting isn't interested. He tells Liz she can work this one out by herself. As for the Nitro girls, they continue fighting throughout Nitro. They fight in the showers, they fight in the skybox, and while these fights are going on, Chavo Guerrero pushes his Amway products to viewers at home. I don't even know anymore. Well, it's about time. Steve Blackman returns to Raw in a match against the Godfather, plus we've got Too Cool versus the Hollies. On Nitro, it's Chris Benoit versus Jeff Jarrett versus Sting. I was really looking forward to Sensei Blackman restoring some balance this week because God knows Monday Nitro's got me all messed up in the head. But unfortunately, this one only lasted 1 minute. That's what she said. It was clean as a whistle too. She didn't say that. Not sure who the Godfather annoyed backstage, but he got in a big boot, 2 clotheslines, a body slam and a leg drop before Steve took Godfather out with a motherfucker kick. The crowd were pretty shocked by this, but they really shouldn't have been. This is what Steve Blackman does best, and these hoes want to be thankful that Shane Blackman didn't make an appearance. The Dudley Boys are playing cards backstage with the Acolytes. We'll come back to this soon, but Bradshaw and Farouk are clearly trying to hustle Bubba Ray and Devon. Things are getting a bit feisty already, but the game continues on Raw's War. Rikishi came to the ring with Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty 2 Hotty. Hardcore Holly couldn't help but talk trash to Big Rikishi. He said the big man has more dimples on his rear end than a golf ball, and so Rikishi attacked Crash before the match got underway. Rikishi's teaming up with Viscera at Armageddon to face the Hollys in a real battle of the super heavyweights. Hardcore didn't get in the ring once to help his partner out. Too Cool dominated Young Crash and fans got treated to the worm. The match ended with a leg drop from Grandmaster Sexay, and the crowd actually cheered for Too Cool during this match. Hardcore tried to attack Too Cool after the bell, but Rikishi got in the ring to wipe Bombastic Bob out. Hardcore took a belly to belly followed by a banzai drop, and it all ended with Rikishi and Too Cool dancing in the ring. Before our Nitro match, we see Medusa using her womanly ways to get a shot at her boyfriend's cruiserweight title. Evan agrees to the match as long as he can get in Medusa's knickers, and this is how you become #1 contender like a true professional. Okay, so this should have been a good triple threat match here thanks to the talent inside the ring, but the guys were only afforded 3 minutes and 50 seconds. For a triple threat match, this isn't long enough, and therefore everything's very rushed. Jeff Jarrett becomes the main target for both Chris Benoit and Sting, but as expected, these two turn on each other when Benoit tries to get a sneaky pinfall win. This allows Jarrett to get in some offense on both men, though his crossbody to Sting could have looked better. The babyfaces refocus and Jarrett finds himself in a bad spot, but Sting hits Benoit with a stinger splash when Jeff moves out of the way. Still, Chris manages to put Jeff in the crossface and Sting has to break it up. Miss Elizabeth then runs down and her mere presence puts a halt to Sting's offense. She still wants Sting to help her out, but all the Stinger wants to do is finish his match. The total package then gets in the ring and the Icon takes a chair shot, and then Benoit takes a shot with Jarrett's guitar. We think this is the end of the match, but Benoit actually wins via pinfall after Dustin Rhodes makes another appearance. Dustin hits Jeff with the ring bell before pulling Benoit over Jarrett. So Chris Benoit is the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight Championship, even though Bret Hart's handed Goldberg a title shot at Starrcade 99. Backstage, Symphony wants to get it on with the Maestro after those lovely presents he just sent her, but that's not the Maestro, ladies and gents.
Now that your daddy's gone, you walk around here thinking you are someone. But David Flair, you could have had it all, but the unfortunate truth is you suck big balls.
David freaks Symphony out before asking why the piano won't work. He gets her to open it up and we see the Maestro inside. Great stuff. David then bangs his head off the piano because that's one way to get sound out of it, I guess. And yeah, more fun and frolics with David Flair. What a man, what a legend. We've got Triple H taking on Test next on Raw, while over on Nitro, it's the Kevin Nash vs Goldberg match. You don't need to wonder if the Nitro match had any interference because Goldberg's already fighting Scott Hall in the backstage area. Kevin Nash runs back and he helps his buddy out a little, but then Sid Vicious evens the odds. This results in Kevin Goldberg finally making it down the rampway and into the ring, but Scott and Sid continue with their interference, so it's already a giant clusterfuck without the match even settling down. Scott Hall hits the referee and Goldberg with a chair. Why referees are still getting taken out in no DQ matches is beyond me, but Bret Hart ends up coming down and he takes the chair away from Scott. The Hitman then cracks Nash with a chair shot across the back, and this sets Big Sexy up for a spear. Goldberg then performs the jackhammer as another referee gets in the ring, and Goldberg wins via pinfall. After the match, if you can even call it a match, Kevin Nash announces the main event. The cage is going to get lowered again, and the Outsiders want Bret Hart, Benoit, Sid, and Goldberg in a triple threat tag team match. So that's 2 cage matches, 3 no DQ matches, and a mud wrestling match on a single show. Oh, and we've also got another Jerry Flynn backstage brawl coming up too. This bottle of whiskey isn't going to last forever. Over on Raw, someone wearing a Vince McMahon mask comes out to officiate Triple H's match against Test, and you can tell by the mannerisms that this is, in fact, Vince McMahon. He doesn't unmask throughout the entire match, but you can tell it's him. A power slam from Test gets followed up with a neckbreaker. Triple H replies with a Harley Race knee, followed by a smooth suplex. The Stooges are then seen backstage calling Vince over to watch the match, so clearly they're trying to throw everyone off the scent. Hunter applies a sleeper. It stays applied for a pretty long time. When Test frees himself, he ends up taking a snappy DDT from the game. Vince then has words with Triple H, and it looks like Hunter's now putting 2 and 2 together. The ref then tries to restrain Hunter, and this gives Test the opportunity to regroup. Test performs his gut-wrench powerbomb and a sidewalk slam, and while Triple H does counter the pump handle slam, he still takes a back suplex. Hunter takes care of Test on the outside before grabbing a chair. He gets in the ring and our masked referee takes the chair away from Hunter. The ref also refuses to count the pinfall when Hunter delivers the facebreaker knee smash, so Vince gets punched in the face before Hunter tries to remove the mask. Shane McMahon then dashes down to the ring. He wipes Triple H out with a chair shot. This allows Test to hit his top rope elbow, and Triple H gets screwed with a fast count from referee Vince. A career highlight here for Test, but Triple H doesn't seem too bothered. He laughs in the ring before telling the cops backstage that clearly that was Vince McMahon out there in the ring tonight. These cops, including this guy who looks on with serious intent, need to do their jobs and arrest Vince right now. But unfortunately for Triple H, McMahon doesn't get put in the slammer again tonight on Raw. McMahon has 2 alibis, Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson. That EMT we've been seeing for weeks on WWF television, she's cutting a promo next on Raw. On Nitro, it's Elizabeth versus Ronda Singh in a mud wrestling match, plus Jerry Flynn versus The Wall. Right, so the mud wrestling match doesn't actually happen. Liz tells Lex backstage that she won't do it, and Lex tells Liz she'll be breaching her contract. He even spells it out for her.
You don't understand the words breach.
There's nothing you can do.
B-R-E-C-H. Nothing I can do to you. Get back here.
Liz runs away. This annoys the powers that be, and Lex has to promise Russo that by the end of the night, Miss Elizabeth will get a little dirty, because tonight, in the semi-main event, we're going to see Lex Luger versus Miss Elizabeth in a mud wrestling match. Back in the arena, Ronda pulls referee Roddy Piper into the mud and they frolic around for a while. Creative Control also get dragged in as they decided to oversee this absolute mess, and it ends with all 4 getting covered in mud and Roddy Piper's the first to leave. I really don't know what to say, and I hope what you see on your screen does all the talking for me. From here we go backstage where Arn Anderson wants to talk to Vince Russo. He tries to plead his case in regards to his recent firing, but it's Curt Hennig who tells Anderson to beat it. Curt took Arn's spot once before in the Four Horsemen, and now he's telling him he doesn't have a job anymore in WCW. We then see Roddy Piper fighting with Hall and Nash while covered in mud. No reason for it at all really, but this leads to Roddy Piper being named the special referee for tonight's main event. Earlier on, Big Butthead Jerry Flynn says he's now the ruler of the block, a new match type where 2 men enter but only 1 man leaves. The contestants go in with their bare hands and bare feet, but when it was time for the Wall to step into the block for a fight with Mr. Flynn, both men had footwear on. Some comedian out there is probably thinking Jerry was talking about weapons, but I'd love to see someone swing a kendo stick in between their toes. So it's basically a boiler room brawl, and for some reason this fight was shot in 15 frames per second, which is really off-putting. Last week's backstage match against the Barbarian was alright, but the frame rate alone makes this really annoying to watch. You could also hear the crowd booing the match, and they booed even louder when the Wall kicked the door open, but he didn't have the sense to walk out of it. In the end, Berlin comes out to help the Wall, but Wall shows his gratitude by chasing Berlin out of the block. I think this means Jerry Flynn lost the match, but who knows? Even Bobby Heenan said, "I don't get it," before Nitro cut away for its next match. So that WWF EMT, her name is Barbara Bush, or BB for short. The name BB has a double meaning, by the way, which fans found out when Ivory removed her top on SmackDown this past week. Barbara was trying to help Miss Kitty, who was choking on a mushroom during a gravy bowl match. Yeah, the WWF weren't completely innocent when it came to booking nonsense matches either. BB's a pretty bad talker. She says she was humiliated on SmackDown last week, and like a robot, she says she wants to challenge Ivory to an evening gown match at Armageddon. Quite the transition from EMT to pro wrestler right here. Ivory comes out and she says BB's just trying to make friends with all the perverts in the audience. She must be totally ignoring the fact that it was she who ripped Barbara's top off on SmackDown. And as expected, it all ends with BB getting her top torn off again, while Jerry Lawler says her cup runneth over. So the WWF are not investing in women who can actually wrestle, and that's a shame. Val Venis had a match against Olympic hero Kurt Angle. On Nitro, it's Midnight versus Curt Hennig. Curt did not hold back at all when fighting Midnight. He had no issues slapping her across the face multiple times, and anytime he put Midnight on the mat, he made sure not to go lightly on her. There's one part of the match that'll make you stop in your tracks though, and it's something I can't show on YouTube. Basically, Curt had Midnight in an abdominal stretch and he decided to slap her repeatedly on the chest. He was slapping her breasts over and over again, and not in a way that would cause her physical harm in the context of a pro wrestling match. There's a possibility that Curt hit her the first time on the chest out of pure instinct, and when he tried to cover it up by doing it again, he made it look way worse. But you can be the judge on this one. Whatever the case, it wasn't a good look at all for Curt. The lights went out, fans expected Booker T to show up, but it's Stevie Ray. Stevie's returned to WCW, he goes after Curt right away, but the lights go out again. Once again, fans expect Booker T, but it's Curly Bill. The fans boo loudly, the lights go out once again, but this time they cheer when they come back on because Arn Anderson's in the ring. Why everyone needs the lights on, lights off entrance is beyond me, and maybe the arena didn't pay their electricity bill, I don't know. Curt and Curly Bill get taken out, the babyfaces celebrate in the ring, and we then check in with the Mama Lukes and the girls they brought back to their hotel room. Things are going pretty well. Johnny the Bull's a bit worried that the boys haven't taken care of Disco Inferno yet, but Vito says there's still plenty of time for Disco. For now, the boys have made a delicious spaghetti and meatball dish for their ladies, but these girls want to jump straight to the main course. So they bring the Mama Lukes to their double bed, they tie them up, and Big Vito's more than happy to play along. The girls then leave, and this is when Disco Inferno and Lash LaRue walk in. Now, if you thought Disco and Lash were going to get frisky with the boys, you'd be sadly mistaken. Instead, they throw the spaghetti and tomato sauce all over the Mama Lukes. Tony Marinara then phones Disco, and Disco tells Tony to come get his boys. We then cut over to Larry Walker of the Colorado Rockies, who has this look on his face. This is a man who's had way too much Nitro tonight, and he's going to have a serious hangover tomorrow morning. Over on Raw, Kurt Angle once again gets annoyed that fans are booing him. Nothing new here. Jim Ross then revealed that the British Bulldog's defending his European title against Val Venis at Armageddon in a few weeks' time, so naturally Davey Boy came out to cause a little trouble. No chin locks here unfortunately, but he did hit Venis with a steel chair, and this allowed Curt to hit his Olympic slam for the 1-2-3. I think they're trying to turn Venis back into a babyface after that abysmal run he had against Mick Foley. And speaking of Mick, Mankind's backstage where he reassures Al Snow that The Rock's going to pick him as the Rock and Sox tag team partner in our next matchup. The Rock walks in and he refuses to talk to Al, so instead, and to cut a long story short, he tells Mick to tell Al to shove a hockey stick up his candy ass. Snow will not be in our next match, but he does seem pretty happy that he's going to Disneyland tomorrow with his friend Mick Foley. DX take on the Rock and Sock Connection plus their mystery partner next on Raw. On Nitro, it's the Total Package versus Liz mud wrestling match. So Lex carries Elizabeth out to the mud pool. He then sets her down and Liz smacks Luger across the face. Luger then grabs Liz, he throws her into the mud, and Lex then prepares to enter the mud himself. Before he does that, he throws a bucket of mud all over his valet. And just before Lex can get in the pool, Sting comes out to shove him in. Lex tries to get out, but Sting punches him right back in. The Stinger then throws Lex's expensive shoes into the mud, followed by his expensive jacket. Liz then gets out and... oh dear, sore ass in the morning, I'm sure. Really, Liz falling over was probably the highlight of this whole thing, and I don't say that to be mean. I can't get over how dreadful this episode of Nitro's been. So the Big Red Machine's pulling double duty tonight. It's almost like he's working on Nitro. Kane's the mystery partner for the Rock and Sock Connection, while Al Snow's left to watch the match in the back. Kane was doing just fine taking out every member of DX, but things went downhill when Mick tagged in. Al thought his friend needed a little help, so he grabbed head and he made his way down to ringside. In the time it took Al to make it to the ring, Mankind got X-Pac in the Mandible Claw and he tagged in Rock to finish off the match. The crowd went crazy as Rock cleaned house and he had the match won after delivering a rock bottom to Billy Gunn. Al then got in the ring though and he hit Road Dogg with head. The referee disqualifies the babyfaces. DX win the match and Rock's not happy about it, so Al Snow takes a rock bottom followed by the People's Elbow while Mankind watches on from the corner. I wonder if this means Mick and Al aren't going to Disneyland tomorrow. The card game continues backstage and Bradshaw's cheating. He's swapping cards while Farouk and Bubba talk trash to each other. All four men laugh at Flyboy Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge when the Dudleys say they may be the Acolytes' enemies, but they sure ain't the public enemy. And then Bubba goes all in. He empties his pockets, he bets Steve Vaughn's watch, he puts his faith in whatever hand he's currently got, and what do you know, 6 aces. Bradshaw's having none of it, he smashes his beer glass over Bubba's head, and a brawl breaks out where the Dudleys actually hold their own against the Acolytes. It seems Farouk and Bradshaw may have met their match here as neither team gets the advantage. So let's hope for more card games next week on Raw. Maybe Bubba can get 7 aces. Wedding bells ring at the end of Raw this week, while on Nitro it's the Outsiders versus Benoit and Bret versus Sid and Goldberg. Roddy Piper and the Outsiders didn't bother getting a shower before tonight's main event. They come to the ring covered in dry mud while their opponents come out looking fresh. So it's first fall to a finish. It's just a big brawl inside the cage really. There's nothing I can say here because I'd just be mentioning guys punching and kicking each other, at least for the first portion of the match. But the Outsiders had to deal with their two opposing teams working together. Hall and Nash were the targets inside the steel cage match. The crowd did pop when Goldberg and Nash started fighting each other, but they were quick to move on to other opponents and the brawl continued on. It got a bit more interesting when Jeff Jarrett showed up with a bunch of guitars. He got in the cage where he broke those guitars over Piper and Goldberg's heads. Bret Hart got handcuffed to the cage, so he's pretty much out of this match. And now we've got Benoit and Sid trying to fight off Nash, Hall and Jarrett. In the end, Benoit went to the top of the cage and he hit Scott with his diving headbutt and Scott lost via pinfall. Sid mustn't have cared who won this match because he didn't try to break up the pin. So the team of Bret and Benoit win the Nitro main event, but Jarrett manages to break another guitar over Benoit's head after the bell. Goldberg eventually wakes up to throw Jarrett into the cage. The cage panel almost opened up and he even threw him in a second time, but the cage stayed intact. The heels fight back, Goldberg takes the Outsider's edge, Sid gets jackknifed and Benoit takes the stroke. The commentators now fully understand that Double J has an alliance with the Outsiders, and do remember, the one person who didn't get badly hurt during this whole match was WCW champion Bret Hart. Right, the wedding, here we are. Like it or not, it's probably one of the most important nights in WWF or WWE history. The bridesmaids get brought down to the ring by different superstars. D'Lo, the Hardys, Christian, Edge, Shane and Linda McMahon walk down, both looking very happy to be here tonight. And then the groom Test comes out to his entrance music. This always makes me laugh. You have this organ music for the bridesmaids, then it's some rock song with unintelligible lyrics. It's still a banger entrance song though. And then Vince brings his daughter down to the ring so she can make the rest of Test's life a living hell. The officiant then starts going through the formalities before two randoms begin singing a tender love song on the entranceway. And guys, I'm going to admit it, I actually really like this song. I'm going to play it for you right now because it is really heartwarming.
Imagine getting married to Stephanie McMahon. She'll chew your balls off, Andy. Run as fast as you can. She's gonna smoke all your stash. She doesn't wash her ass. It won't be very funny when Vince pays you hush money. Test, you need to get out of here. Get out of this place. Kick Shane in the balls and punch Linda in the face. You're gonna feel so stuck. Dad-in-law's a dirty old fuck. It won't be so funny when Vince pays you hush money.
Well, the song didn't put Test off and he's still going for it, the absolute madman. The officiant asks if there's anyone who opposes this marriage made in hell, and just before he can begin reading Andy's wedding vows, Triple H's music plays in the arena. The crowd pops for it, but they knew it was going to happen. Just before everyone came to the ring, DX were laughing backstage, so something's going to happen here. Triple H knows that the wedding invitations were only extended to immediate family and close friends. DX are not welcome, but Hunter felt that everyone in the ring should take a close look at the Titantron right this minute. A video plays that shows Triple H driving around Las Vegas. He finds the little white chapel where Joan Collins and Michael Jordan got married. Not to each other, obviously. And for you pro wrestling trivia nuts, this was also where Colonel Robert Parker, better known as Tennessee Bruce Lee, tried to get married to Sister Sherry back at Clash of the Champions 32. Anyway, Hunter drives in, he has a look at the prices, and yeah, those are pretty reasonable, but Hunter's opting for the cheapest option possible. Hunter continues his drive, a lady comes out to ask him who he's marrying, and Hunter reveals that he's actually marrying Stephanie McMahon. You see, during Stephanie's party, the guy serving drinks gave Stephanie one more shot for the road, and this guy was paid off by Triple H. Hunter's got his license ready, he's got the rings, he's got $40 and he's got no time. So the lady goes through the wedding vows and Triple H has to improvise a little when Stephanie needs to speak.
Will you take Hunter for your husband?
Oh, yes, I do.
Hunter then rushes the lady because he really wants to leave. So the rings go on and once again Triple H has to provide a voice for Stephanie. It's made official, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon are married. The bartender then puts some decorations on the happy couple's car, and Hunter says the following before driving off.
Hey, get a nice shot of the brand new Mr. and Mrs. Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Back in the arena, Stephanie's crying her eyes out, and Triple H comes out to remind Vince that he's now a member of the immediate family. He then calls Vince Dad.
Dad!
And Hunter thinks his new dad must have one question on his mind. It's not if Triple H and Stephanie consummated their marriage, but how many times they consummated the marriage. Raw ends with Hunter leaving through the curtain. Tess goes after the game while Stephanie stays in the ring with tears in her eyes. Wrestling weddings can sometimes be a bit annoying to sit through, but this was an all-timer here from the WWF. A colossal mess from WCW this week. Every single match had interference of some sort. We had way too short gimmick matches throughout the whole night. How many guitars did Jarrett break? Like 5 or something? There were a total of 50 cutaways throughout this entire show, and yes, I did rearrange things to make it a bit easier to digest. Just fixing the order of the show to make it coherent took some time, and I really shouldn't have to do this at all. This was, without question, the worst episode of Nitro I've watched so far on this Reliving the War journey, and I dare you to go watch it yourself. Don't skip anything, don't fast forward a single moment, watch it from start to end and witness how far World Championship Wrestling's fallen. You won't make it out alive. Raw wins for the wedding alone. There's no need to explain this one, guys. Raw's on 115 points, Nitro's on 76, and we've got 21 ties on the board. In the TV ratings, Raw drew a massive 6.5, while Nitro went back down to a 3.1. Next week on Nitro, the Revolution debut a brand new look. Disco Inferno gets a little payback from Tony Marinara, and Lex Luger tries to get back in Miss Elizabeth's good books. It sounds like another doozy. On Raw, Mankind and Al Snow try to save their friendship before it's way too late. Kurt Angle tries to open his own dojo and he wants Steve Blackman to join up. And Stephanie tries to get out of her marriage, but Triple H isn't going to make it easy. As always, you can see the next episode of Reliving the War 1 week early by heading over to my Patreon page. Plus, you can also see Armageddon, which has already been put together and uploaded for supporters. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and please take care.